If we wouldn't have had the pandemic, we wouldn't be doing all these conference things.
That's Friday, and it's 9 a.m.
All right, we're going to call the meeting to order. Welcome everyone to our April 24th, 2026 special meeting. We're going to make sure all members are being able to be seen and heard on camera. Everybody got their cameras on. We're going to start to my left and do roll call.
Oh,
Sorry, that's the area manager.
I didn't check my team.
Annette Lutz, Toledo rep.
Brian Honan, Assistant Legal Counsel.
Lindsay McKinney, the training manager.
Orville Sharp, BE Area Manager.
Yvette Shackelford, Zanesville rep and chair, and let's see who's on the phone with us.
We have Chris Saban, Frank Bergassa, and Mark Wood. And Mark Messick. Oh, yeah, and Mark Messick.
Christy just walked in the door.
Anyone we're going to approve our special meeting minutes from April 10th. Anyone have any issues with the April 10th meeting minutes? Hearing no objections, they'll be approved without objection. Public comment. Any public comments? Hearing none. I think we were still doing Rule 5 of the inventory, right? Where are we at in that one?
Yeah, so we were still and just doing general discussion. We kind of, Madam Chair said we were going to have a lot of discussion about Rule 5 and kind of get an idea for what we wanted to do about inventory.
Mhm.
I don't know that we have language per se because I'm probably going to rewrite the majority of the rule. Or, other than the beginning there where it talked about just general stuff, supplies and what equipment and all that. But, so Madam Chair, I'm at a loss for where to begin.
Okay.
But you're honest.
Yeah.
My computer is being we were discussing. Did anyone else? We were discussing the tax yet last week. Am I right? And trying. Did everybody get to read that? All right, everybody. No one had coffee today.
Madam Chair,
Yes, go ahead, Frank.
I was going to say, I have not had a chance to read it. I've read it a while back, but it's been a long time, and I have not had a chance to read it. I apologize for that, and I should have taken care of that, but I got sidetracked with some other things.
Mm-hmm. Where do you all think? Do anybody have any suggestions where to start?
Madam Chair, I have gone around and around and around and trying to come up with a solution.
We're just stuck in that one point.
What to do during a transitional inventory. And I
don't see how the Bureau can totally get out of it. I'm with you on that part. I think we had a suggestion that the incoming operator get on a payment plan. And Christy, what was the issues?
The issue with the payment plan is that it has to be within the biennium. So if it's in the last 3 weeks or 3 months, they would have 3 months to pay off all of that. I think that the problem is that people are worried about getting stiffed by an incoming operator.
Yeah.
Like the outgoing is worried about getting stiffed. And again, Indiana does it, Kentucky does it. The other option, like I just, here's a personal thing where my car was hit last month and I had to go to a body shop. Well, because it was thousands of dollars, they would only take a cashier's check. That's another option, is to require people to bring, but then you would have to know the amount. And so I don't know how that would work.
Right.
That's the thing right there. It's that two, yes, the Bureau wants out of the whole mediator in the middle. Like, I do think that we need to be a part of the transitions, and we
Yeah.
need to be a part of, counting and all of that. But at the end of the day, the transaction should be between the two operators. I don't know if, the only other way to do it, if someone's worried about getting stiffed, is like the incoming gives the Bureau a check, and then we turn around and give that to the outgoing. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, the only problem is if it's a bad check, it doesn't or the other issue is you have if you, like you said, you don't know the amount. What happens if the person doesn't have enough money to buy that inventory? And that would be an issue as well.
Then they should be bidding on
not get
that.
the location.
Yeah, they should be bidding on that
I mean,
facility.
that'll get stuff where, you're there and we're doing the transition and then the person doesn't have enough money and then, okay, what do you do with the location?
Right, they shouldn't bid on that location. I mean, that's part of the thing that I did that Florida had, where you had if we have where, the estimated amount of inventory is this and you can't afford that, I know that there's also been discussion too, which, like, if someone were to, as this happens, if someone were to tank a site on their way out, we are responsible to get that back up and running to the appropriate level. And there would be separate funds that we would be able to do that with. Because remember, the other thing is that the clock does kind of change over after every new person comes.
The only thing is I think you kind of just, for someone to be comfortable to make sure they get their money going out. I think knowing that they know you guys will buy that person from inventory. Most people would rather, make sure that they get their money and not get screwed over, with the, not, I'm sorry, I should have used a better word.
It's hard not to say it too. I don't know what other way to say it.
Madam Chair.
Tell me,
Frank,
yeah.
Go ahead, Frank, I'm sorry.
The one thing that I did hear Christy say that I am concerned about is if someone doesn't have the money, they shouldn't be bidding on that facility. But I thought that's what VR, especially if it's viewed as a promotion, I thought that was something vocational rehab would be able to assist with, as far as helping that vendor, whether established or not. If it's a promotion, I would hope they would be able to help. Because I don't want to see people locked out. I don't want to see people locked out due to lack of money just to get a promotion to move to a better facility. That's my concern with what she's saying. I understand what she's saying, but I also want to make sure that we try and find a way to get this as equitable as we can and make sure that there is a pathway for people to move up.
One of the concerns I have is we need to have what can VR do and what can't they do? Because I thought that that's only for incoming new people getting into our program, or is it even established? Because that's where we're stuck at. Not so much the new licensees coming into the program; they're covered. But it's the established moving from one location to another, and maybe somebody is downsizing. Maybe they're not. They're going from having a large route to getting smaller.
So again, I think part of it is that for a big promotion, we've talked about this. If someone's going from a small route to a big, large university, they should be able to open up a VR case for a job save. We talked about like fast tracking that, and that then the VR counselor could write a check to the outgoing for that inventory.
Mm-hmm.
But then again, that inventory becomes the ownership of the incoming.
Uh-huh.
They don't owe that back. But then when another person comes, they
They
either
want their money.
pay. So then I do see a lot of people going, well, I want this free product, I'll just open up a VR case. But I think that there might have to be some parameters where some people could afford that, but it would have to be a job save or a job promotion type thing.
In one of the states we talked to, I can't remember, their case, because they were part of the BE program, it stayed open. You know, you didn't, they didn't, what was the state, and that.
I don't remember.
I want to
don't-
say Indiana.
But yeah, it was a strange. I don't know if it was kind of like open,
Right.
but
They
it
had
was
someone
kind
working
of
with the BE program.
yeah,
where
which
they-
would be kind of our fast
Yes,
track thing.
yes.
Our folks should not have to go through any assessment,
Right,
all of the
Right.
stuff that takes
Right.
a lot of time.
Right.
but even established operator would be able to, have that resource as well.
Yes, if there, yes. So I do have, I've got up here like notes that I've taken that I've pulled from other states, and I could go over a couple of these to just show you the different states and how people do it. Do you think that would be helpful?
Yes.
Okay, so Rhode Island, the 2016 rules, upon termination of a vending facility assignment by a vendor, the blind vendor shall be permitted to engage in an inventory of all equipment, merchandise, and petty cash, but the SLA shall be responsible to take the inventory as soon as practical following such termination. The SLA shall, within reasonable a period of time, submit a profit and loss statement to the vendor or his or her heirs. This is like, I think if someone died, and either pay any remaining profits to him, her, or them, or make a demand upon him, her, or them in the event that debts outstanding. All equipment, merchandise shall remain the subject vending facility, accepting perishable and petty cash until the final inventory is completed. The petty cash will be returned to SLA upon termination of the assignment and added to the value of the final inventory. Equipment and stock shall be appraised at the current fair market value, then sold for such value or retained for the continued operation of that facility by another vendor or stored for future use. Proceeds from the sale of any and all equipment and merchandise shall be deposited in and credited to the accounts from which they were drawn and appropriated in accordance with the matching ratio. God, that's confusing. In effect at the time of their purchase. A complete inventory of all such goods shall be maintained by the SLA. So yeah, I still
I hear a lot of responsibility to the
I
SLA being
do.
involved.
Equipment and permanent stock, which is not the property of the state of Rhode Island, may be inventoried at the discretion of the SLA for purpose of determining worth and value in the event of unexpected loss, theft, fire, etc.
Okay.
Illinois,
Yeah, that-
you don't like Illinois?
no,
Rhode
Rhode
Island.
Island. Rhode Island.
It made no sense.
And I don't. You just right. I have no clue how they do inventory.
Illinois, the outgoing vendor must verify with the business consultant the appropriate inventory level to leave at the facility. Damaged and expired items will be excluded from the inventory count. All commodities which the department determines are obsolete or unmarketable will be returned to the vendor and excluded from the inventory count. And then it says from email in 2020 directly from the BE director in Illinois. Who owns the inventory? Here was his answer. Oh, God. This is somewhat hard question to answer in Illinois. We require each vendor to pay back the initial dollar amount of the inventory. The dollar amount is transferable to another location and is reconciled up or down depending on the new location's inventory amount. The only time a vendor would get a total payoff of inventory is if they leave the program. During transitions, the incoming and outgoing vendor must agree on what items would be transferred. In the event of disagreements, the SLA will make a decision on acceptable products. We feel that inventory belongs to the SLA to be used by the vendors to operate their locations and should be replenished. And then I wrote, is the transfer of product between vendors and operators? Yes. Does the SLA have a part in transferring of product and the responsible for product that is not agreed upon? Yes. And then Indiana, startup product inventory purchased by the state licensing agency as part of the vocational rehab plan is the property of the licensed manager. I wrote Christie to follow up with Lockett Phillips. Connecticut, initial stock and supplies means those merchantable items or supplies authorized by the permit if necessary to establish vending facility under Randolph Shepherd, including additional items necessary of the location. Vending facility equipment and initial stock. The board shall furnish each new vending facility with adequate suitable equipment and initial stock of merchandise necessary for its establishment, operation, and maintenance, except that any increase in initial stock required by promotion using federal vocation rehabilitation funds is permitted only when promotion or upgrading from a dry facility to a wet snack bar or cafeteria. No opportunity to become a vendor shall be denied an individual on basis of his unwillingness or inability to purchase the vending facility equipment for the initial stock. So the initial stock and inventory, the following standards procedures shall apply. The board shall set forth the operating agreement and specific types of merchandise to be sold. The board will retain ownership of the initial inventory supplied to the new vendor. And on termination from the vending facility, the following adjustments will be made. A, the board will purchase from the vendor any inventory in excess of the saleable, similar to what we do now. If the value of the final is less than the cost of the initial, the inventory will repay the difference. Initial inventory supplied to a vendor as a voc rehab service between July 1st of 75 and March 20th of 85 shall be adjusted on termination of the vendor from the facility as follows. So it looks like they had a system before and they've morphed more into what we're doing now, which isn't in line with the TAC. Nevada, incoming initial stock. The incoming initial stock acts as verification of working capital. It is conducted on site by the incoming and outgoing operators in the presence of the business enterprise officers. If there are any personal items noted in the BEN site file, the outgoing operator shall remove these items prior to the start of inventory. Smallwares, decorative displays, utensils, and similar items purchased with state funds must remain with the BEN site as state property. Agreement must be reached by the incoming and outgoing operators regarding the count of incoming initial stock and documented by the consultant. Outgoing initial stock. The outgoing operator shall be responsible for having the following: the inventory forms prepared on an Excel spreadsheet or equivalent with an item description and unit cost. Copies of invoices on site to verify unit cost, no more than 6 months old. The outgoing operator or trainee shall not receive credit on products without corresponding valid invoices. In situations in when the BEN program is accounting for outgoing initial stock, the merchandise that falls in the definition of stale inventory, as described below, will not be counted as part of the initial inventory. Exiting operator trainee will have the option of selling that stale inventory to the incoming operator at a discounted price if both parties agree. Initial stock inventory value discrepancies. When leaving a BEN site, an exit initial stock inventory sometimes results in working capital overage or shortage. If there is an overage, the BEN program pays the operator the amount owed to them within 30 days of receiving the last P&L, profit and loss, and set-aside levy. If there is a shortage, the operator pays the BEN program the amount owed within 30 days of notification. Licensed operators will not be permitted to apply for posted site opportunities or sign an operating agreement if they have any current outstanding debt owed to the program or any unresolved issues, including initial stock shortage from any facility, including their current facility. Kentucky, incoming and outgoing operators for their representative are required to be present unless prior notification is given. They must have their own transportation if there are multiple locations. All changes in the coin mech and bill changers will be counted as inventory. money in change boxes, bill validators will be given to the outgoing vendor. Incoming vendor has the option to refuse to purchase any product they do not want. Only items marked for resale will be counted. Items not marked for resale will be given to the outgoing vendor. No exceptions. Only inventory with expiration date of at least 2 weeks out will be counted, but will need to be removed before inventory is counted. I understand that. Inventory with no manufacturer's expiration will be counted only if incoming vendor wants it. Expired inventory will be thrown away or given to the outgoing vendor. Product set to expire in the next 14 days is given to the outgoing vendor at no cost to the incoming vendor. For large inventories or multiple locations, staff may divide into teams. All instructions will be given. The vendors can choose which team they will stay with. All keys, all machines must be brought to inventory for transition. Vendors are asked to provide invoices for accurate pricing on inventory. Otherwise, staff will use Vistar wholesale price book and then Sam's Club website. If no information is found, an internet search will be conducted and the lowest price found will be used. Once the inventory has been tallied, a copy will be sent to both vendors for their review. Once each vendor has looked over the inventory, they are asked to sign that they agree with the results or list any discrepancies. Once vendors agree, the incoming vendor will send payment directly to the outgoing vendor. And then it goes into saleable stock acquisition. The licensee is ready for employment status and is placed as a manager of a vending facility. A saleable stock inventory shall be provided by the licensed counselor on a one-time basis as figured by OVR policy. This amount shall be paid to, 1, the stock wholesalers, enter account to KBE. So I'm assuming that would be like the counselors would buy through Vistar or Coke for the initial. The amount and type of stock necessary for the successful operation of the vending facility shall be determined by the director or designee. Payment for additional stock above that needed for the vending facility shall be the responsibility of the licensee. If the licensee seeks financing for the additional stock, KBE may purchase the stock at the licensee's behalf after KBE has been provided proof that other funding is not available from financial institutions, including Small Business Administration or banks. The licensee shall make affordable monthly payments to KBE up to the value of the stock purchases as set forth in a repayment schedule negotiated and signed by both the licensees and the department's representative. If a vendor transfers through the KBE bid process from one vending facility to another at which KBE owns an initial saleable stock inventory, the entering vendor shall purchase the KBE the initial inventory valued at the wholesale cost.
Okay, let me ask you that. That's the Kentucky, that, I think that is the closest, the part about they're on a payment plan. I mean, how are they able to, or you think that they're not gonna be able to continue this the way to be in line with the tax?
So I don't know exactly. Again, we had Kentucky come and and Indiana. I thought Indiana and Kentucky were very similar.
Mm-hmm.
I think too that you've got a couple different things going, like some payment plan, like people, I've seen in other states, it's a percentage off and it's part of the MOR if they owe. At the end of the day, I think that this is also important that, and what I don't think we've done right, that the first time you go in to a facility, if it's a brand new facility that we set up, that's free inventory for the operator that they shouldn't have to pay back.
Right.
So if it's a brand new facility that we're going into University of Toledo, main campus, we're buying that. That shouldn't be paid back to us. But the theory behind that is that it's maintained, and then when that person leaves and another person comes in, another person coming in is buying that stock that person initially got for free. And then if we wipe out everyone's debt right now, I mean, that's one aspect of it. The other aspect that we've talked about too is this every 6 month thing You know, the other thing that we've talked about that, again, the whole money, like, there's other things that we could be doing to help people as well.
When we talk about, you said 6 months. If when you all buy the stock and the outgoing person leave, they still have to leave. So say if you bought $2,500, I'm just giving an example.
Yeah.
$2,500. If they left and they left $5,000, they only getting they're still leaving the 2,500. But anything above that is what you are saying is a problem, or
Yeah,
because you all are responsible to pay the outgoing the 2,500 extra. Is that what
right now, the way the rules are right now, if someone was given, and it was appropriately that this should be $2,500, right? This should be 25, and a new person comes in and that person has 5,000. Again, I don't think it's fair for them to be overstocked because someone made poor decisions by overstocking it. I think that they would be required to pay 2,500, and then that outgoing person needs to take that extra 2,500 worth of stock with them.
I think it's also what we have to take in mind too, things cost of goods and everything goes up. So I don't think it'll double, but definitely things will increase. So you can have pretty close to that, but maybe it's more because of the value of it. You know what I mean? The value at the time of whenever, you transition the value, like, Coke products, everything is increased.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I think this part we can figure out. I think that we can figure out a process, assuming that, which for the record, I don't like forgiving everybody their initial inventory, but assuming we do that, I don't know if we can get around it when we change the whole system. But if we do that, so everybody comes in with zero indebtedness to the state, as far as inventory goes, and they leave with that. I think there's a process we can figure out to tell that person what level of inventory would be acceptable for them to leave. I don't think it'll take a minute, but I think we can come up with that. And we can put it in the vacancy announcement. We say this is this facility, we would require about a $5,000 initial inventory. And you'd work with the outgoing operator, I think, even to come up with that number, because they're the ones with the expertise to know the facility. We won't always take their word for it, because we know there's some that wouldn't, but maybe you can consult with them. And I'm think just kind of talking this through, and I think this part we can fit. Ideally, what Christy said is true. If everybody got something for free at the beginning and owed nothing, you would like to think folks would leave that same amount knowing that they received that, initial at the start with. It's not going to happen. I mean, it's just not. People are not going to leave. They're going to figure out a way to, make sure they profit from things. And so I don't have a problem with their stuff over. If we say 5,000 and there's 6,000 there, then the outgoing guy, he's responsible for another $1,000. He can take it with them. He can maybe work with the incoming if they want to buy it. That I don't have a problem with. It's that initial, that 5,000 that's left behind. And then we have issues we've talked about, people who paid off their inventory. That we may make them whole with that. What about folks that have a very low initial inventory? That didn't, that took very little coming in. And I use my own facility. I have initial inventory of 2,500. I have 25 vending machines. If I left only $2,500 there, things are empty. So, I mean, there's a lot of things to work out, and some of those details I think we can, if we get a system worked out. Indiana, do you have their rules there? I mean, you read part of it. I know you read a response to an email. Do you have Indiana's actual?
There was a few things in different.
And again, Indiana's
Yeah.
a little different too. They are a non-set-aside state. I just have, this was from Indiana too. Below all I have, within our rules is reference to inventory control. However, the state of Indiana, the existing managers own their inventory of the location being bid out. The incoming manager therefore has to make the decision of whether they are going to purchase or not the inventory the existing manager owns. The incoming manager can decide they don't want to purchase anything and provide their own stock. That usually doesn't happen due to the time constraints and removing all the product and putting virtually the same thing right back in the machines. Also, it has been a practice of our state to stay out of the two existing managers transitioning locations. However, I do make sure a BC is there to make sure everyone goes by the rule and one manager isn't bullying another.
That would never.
No.
Texas, initial inventory for newly licensed managers, the agency shall furnish without charge the initial inventory of merchandise and expandables for the initial assignment of newly licensed licensees. The initial inventory of merchandise and expandables shall be sufficient to assist the manager with the starting of the business. Subsequent inventory of merchandise, the manager shall maintain an inventory of merchandise, sanitation, cleaning, at the same quantities that were transferred to the manager upon assignment. Managers assigned to any facility other than their initial assignment in Texas shall acquire the merchandise, sanitation, cleaning supplies, and expandables as determined by the agency to be sufficient to satisfactorily operate to effectively expedite the changeover in facilities. When a facility is already stocked with merchandise, sanitation, cleaning supplies, the existing stock shall become part of the required inventory stock level of the incoming manager. The amount owed by the incoming manager for the existing stock shall be the amount agreed to by the affected parties. If the existing inventory is the property of the state, the amount owed by the incoming manager shall be the amount paid with state funds.
That's a little confusing.
Yeah.
It is very confusing.
Madam Chair, I think
Yes. And
one thing we can do, and we still have to figure out what to do with all the existing folks. But I think one thing we can do is new people. Those getting their first facility as of whatever date we could put, they have to sign off on something. They're saying we're going to give you all this inventory. Well, that inventory is yours, and so the expectation is that they would leave that behind and not expect to be reimbursed for it because they were given something they could, whatever they leave behind. Now they may not leave anything behind; they may truck it all away because it is theirs. But I think we can tell them, look, you were given your initial inventory. So anything you leave behind, that just passes on to the next person.
so does that make, does that make their part of what level they have to have? Because establishing and what's the initial? Because I think that's the thing. How do we establish this is the level that each time, unless there's something changing at the facility. But this is the level, this is what you're given, this is the level you have to leave. But, kind of like what we're doing now. But can you make that part of, we should be able to make that part of the rule?
I believe so. I believe for people moving forward,
Yeah.
we can get this to work. Because Christy is right. You're handed something at the beginning. You are absolutely handed something, and it can be fairly generous. We don't want to overburden with inventory, but since VR is doing it, we're not as worried about program dollars. So they can be given something kind of like you would even maybe the carts or something. I don't know, but they're given this inventory, so the expectation is that you would pass this on to the next person. I think that's something we can do and have somebody sign off on and all of that moving forward.
Agree, yeah.
Madam Chair.
Yeah.
Sorry, Annette.
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, but what happens when say it's $2,500 and all they leave is $2,500 worth of Monster? You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
And the incoming isn't gonna want that,
If they're
so
not gonna accept it.
not that we've ever had that.
Right.
Well, Madam Chair, they left,
Yeah.
I mean, there's no,
I hate to be that person.
no, it's true though.
Yeah.
Well, because the income is gonna say no, like you bet.
Like, you know.
But that's where I think that, and how some states have done it too, is that it's not only the value that they're set up with, it's the product mixture. It's you know, it's the Lay's, it's the Coke, Pepsi. It's not the Pips and if they decide to go out and get Takis and stuff that are not, that's not what.
Hockey so.
We have people, no, and we have people that go to Mark's and they do, and that's a choice that they make, but that's not something that I think that we would ever force an incoming person to take. So it's
Right.
more than just the value.
Right.
It would actually be like the stock that was purchased, and they have to have a similar makeup. If they want to try new stuff, that's
Yeah.
great, but that shouldn't be put on
No.
an incoming operator.
Right.
Ever.
Yeah.
It's
'Cause we
got to
have
be
had-
it's got to be normal stuff.
Yeah, and not only the levels at a normal level, if you having $2,500 worth of Monster or something like that, that's excessive.
Correct.
Yeah, so
And
if it's anything but-
existing operators that have screwed new ones with they overbought on 7-Up.
Mhm, yeah.
And that's so I think it's not just money, it would actually be appropriate stock.
Yeah.
And we would have that initial stock of what's in there.
Okay, Madam Chair,
Yes, and
let's think this through, because we might have a track for the new folks.
okay.
Then we'll worry about all the existing folks here in a bit. But new people come in, their VR is going, and I would say for their first permanent location, if they're temping a little teeny thing or something, we'll worry about temps here in a minute.
Mhm.
But their first real job, that they come in, they get VR to pay for things. We have them sign off. It is their expectation that you will leave this without anticipating being recompensated, because you're getting your compensation now. You are required to leave a good product mix for, we have some nice language Brian will come up with, stuff normally associated with this type of facility, something like
Any
that.
overage you'd
Well,
be responsible to
yeah.
take out and take with you.
Yes, we can do, I think this we can work out. Now, what happens if they don't?
Well, let me ask you this also. Say if we did buy, they did buy, VR bought the inventory, but it was just enough to go in the machines, not for, remember we talked about before having enough for 2 weeks or something, but what if what they bought wasn't enough to, have the extra or whatever? Do you not, I think we need to leave some wiggle room in there.
What do you mean?
What I mean is, if what's in the machine, so say it was VR bought them 2,500, but that was just enough to fill the machines. It wasn't any extra to replenish the machine. And backstop.
And so, but that's the other thing. In some states, it's 2 weeks. Some states, it's 3 weeks. I think again, the responsibility of, and this gets hairy too. And I know Kelsey's worked on this too. Like, do you do per machine? Is it what is? And one of the reasons I do, and and we could have 2 tracks, but one of the reasons, not only studying it and getting rid of everyone's on the book stuff, because that I would like to reset these facilities that are all over the place. And again, I think you can argue too, where I do not believe that even VR should be paying for a room full of stock. It should be reasonable, particularly if, someone else is coming in. I don't know. There's a lot. There's a lot.
So much.
Can I say something here?
Yes.
As far as the inventory and like the replenishing the inventory, I noticed when I first came in and did my training, and I was looking at MORs, everybody's purchases were around 45 or 50% of their sales. And you could use that number weekly, monthly, quarterly, or however you want to do it. And so what I'm saying is usually there's a history of the facility before it transfers over. So why can't we use the sales number for that facility and take 50% of that weekly sales and say, this is what we will give you for replenishing your stock on a weekly basis for the first week, or go 2 weeks or 3 weeks. And if you look at the MOR, you'll see it's around 45 or 50% of the sales. That's what their purchases are.
I think
That's
that's a
it.
good idea.
Yeah.
I think that's a good idea because that means you're using data.
And of the weekly sales. Right.
Right.
It depends on how far you want to replenish them. You want to replenish them for 1 week, then it's 1 week of sales.
Yeah.
You want to replenish them for 2 weeks, then you take 2 weeks of their sales.
I think at least probably 2 weeks.
A minimum of 2 weeks.
Minimum,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That should be enough to get you going.
Yeah. Although on a huge campus and stuff, yeah, that.
I like
But-
that idea because, going by machine, you might have machines that turn over really, really fast, where you have other machines that don't turn over. So that's not really a good. And then, I think I like that idea.
Yeah, I do too. I might go home and think of it. I go.
What happened? Hello? I think we lost.
Give
I
one
think it
second. We just lost
I broke it.
you all.
Orville tripped over the cord.
We don't want that to happen to nobody.
Can you all still hear me?
I can hear you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
I mean, we can keep going until we get the hub back up if you want to get back. We are on the road.
Yeah, I think that have to determine the amount. And I would think, like we said, a minimum of 2 weeks,
Yeah,
maybe a maximum of 4. We'll figure
Yeah.
that out.
yeah.
Where we land with that. Maybe we think about 3 weeks, go in the middle somewhere and
Right.
give someone a good little cushion to get started and get a little money built into the business,
Yes.
before they have to start actually purchasing.
Mm-hmm.
So again, I like to think this through. Okay, you got John Doe.
Mm-hmm.
He comes into the program. He's with a VR counselor. He has an open case. He's about to get his first facility. And this is an established facility. It's not brand new.
Mm-hmm.
So it is determined that the outgoing operator, this is where I get confused. So the outgoing operator, Jane Doe, do you have yours on? What's happening?
It's somebody's microphone.
There we go.
Can y'all hear us?
Yeah, better.
Sorry.
Okay, so the outgoing operator, Jane Doe, they still have an inventory agreement with us. They still owe us money. But technically, the new person, what we would do is we would have the counselor write the outgoing operator a check for this inventory.
Right.
So, but what happens to the existing operator who's getting a check for $2,500 but owes us 2,500, do they, and then that, they're moving on to another facility. This is where I get really, I mean, it's
Say that
complex.
again.
Yeah, you're not making sense.
Yeah.
We left out a lot of details.
Yeah, I was.
So I want you guys to do like use cases.
Right.
No, that's just I didn't follow.
Yeah.
So like, brand new operator comes into the program and counselor's gonna give them $2,500 of new inventory.
Right.
And that's probably going to be buying it from an outgoing operator,
Probably.
Okay.
most likely. They're gonna give it to, you bet they're giving it to you.
Mhm.
You're leaving, a new person's coming in, the counselor's gonna cut you a check for that $2,500.
Okay.
You're leaving that product there.
Yes.
Then you still, on the existing system, owe us $2,500.
So I gotta pay that, so the whatever check I get, it goes right to, sounds like.
But then you're moving on, and what happens there?
That's the thing, that's where we stuck at. We said before that an established operator, but I think we're assuming things, the established operator should be able to open to get VR to buy them inventory or to buy their own. What about the operators who do buy their own, like myself and Annette and all
I
of that?
know,
What happens
I
to?
know. And then the other thing is that technically you move on, let's say you don't own it, and you move on, we could do an agreement of payback with you, but it's gotta be within that biennium. And I think it also depends on, like where in that cycle that biennium is and how much, like, again, some of our, the colleges and universities, you're looking $15,000, $20,000.
Like Madam Chair, does it
Yes.
have to be, Christie, and I read the text, I don't remember. I understand it has to be in the biennium. Does it have to be in the biennium that the transition takes place? For example, say somebody transitions in May. Can their payment start in October?
That's an idea.
I think
So
the
then
problem
if we get the 2 years, then beginning with the new biennium to pay back.
The problem is that it's this period of performance, and if the stock is being purchased in May and not being replaced until the following biennium, what RSA is saying is you got to pay us back that money.
Oh, okay. No.
Oh, that's okay.
Yeah.
That's how that
No, that's
works.
not gonna
Okay.
Yeah.
So it has to be within. Okay,
That's not gonna work.
that's right. Our whole thing's confused.
Is there well, I guess we can't have, besides VR, because I'm trying to think about the outgoing operator. If you bid on something, you have to pay if you owe, you have to have it paid off before you, but that might be difficult for some of our larger. You have to have your initial paid off with that.
I don't know, Madam Chair, it's hard because it would be so nice that's where we run into the stumbling block. Because what would be really nice is if we could move forward, say everyone's got to start paying back their initial inventory. Let's forget the forgiving thing. Everyone's got to start paying it back. We're going to set up payment plans. Everyone pays back their initial. Then we have this nice little slush fund of money that can be used to continually keep it going. That ideally would be what we could do. But the feds, because of this notion of this payback thing and not doing it, that's throwing a wrench into the whole thing, and it's annoying.
And I'll be honest, like the feds are confusing because in one aspect they're like, the program was set up to initially provide a turnkey operation and not the continuing thing. But then they kind of pivoted and said, but every 6 months, like every time something opens, the 6-month period starts over again.
What you said, your 6 months.
Every time someone gets a new facility.
Okay, your 6 months starts over again.
Mhm.
Yes. So the outgoing, if that's the case, then the outgoing person, like you said, can still, I think that even if someone going out did have to open up a case to get inventory, you still have the people who buy their own, right? You said VR will pay them, give them a check, or?
Only if they have, the only time that VR is gonna give them a check is if some incoming person has a VR case open, whether that's a brand new person or someone that's trying to promote, that it has to be associated with a case.
Okay, yep.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
and I don't know if this avoids the whole payback thing, but on the facility application, maybe the applicant has to certify that they either have the money in the
Yeah.
bank or they're opening a VR case.
Some kind of verification or something.
You know,
Right.
just
Yes, and then,
Madam Chair, let's explore, because I think, let's explore the thing, and I know this puts an extra step and a little bit of a burden on the Bureau. The notion that the incoming operator, if they owe something, pays the Bureau, and then the Bureau turns around and pays the outgoing. Now, what would happen then, all of a sudden, if they don't pay, the incoming guy, if they want to, well, like we were saying, screw somebody and not pay, well, all of a sudden they have program debt. It's not just to another operator, where an operator would have to go and take them to small claims court or something like that. They owe money to the program. And then we can put the hammer down on them for
yeah,
that.
they wouldn't be able to.
They couldn't bid, we could
So
turn them over to the AG. I mean,
Let's
we
say
could
that-
take their facility, we could put it in the rules that
Yeah,
if they owe money to the program after so long, they lose their BOA.
but we already have that.
Right.
Absolutely.
So we can put the hammer on them for owing the program.
So you're saying, okay, so when they come in, who buys who's buying their initial? The Bureau buys their initial. Is that what you're?
No, the operator would owe it, the incoming operator, if they go, because our whole concern here is, what we've been worried about is the outgoing guy getting taken
Yes, yes.
and not getting their money. A check bouncing or
Mhm,
something along those lines, or say, oh, I'll pay you later, and they never see it,
Yeah.
and they left all this inventory behind, and they have no means of collecting on it
Right.
other than small claims
Mhm,
court, which I don't
Nobody
want to
wants
see
to go
much
there.
to
Yeah.
do that.
mhm.
So they do the inventory, they count it, they figure out the amount. The Bureau sends the incoming operator an invoice for that amount. You owe the program $5,000 because that's how much the inventory you just took on is. You get X amount of days to pay it.
Yeah.
Once they pay it, the Bureau cuts a check to the outgoing operator. So if it doesn't guarantee it, the outgoing operator still could get, the Bureau, I guess, could make it right and still owe to pay the outgoing operator that. We could work that out. But the indebtedness would be to the program,
Yeah.
which has a lot more teeth than an outgoing
And
operator
I
does.
think the outgoing operator still should get paid.
They still should get paid.
But you deal with before they move on. Is there a way that?
Like a pass-through, it'd be
Yeah.
like a pass-through payment, but, so again, what happens to the initial debt that's on the books right now? Because I'm trying to figure out what funds we would use to pay this, that's the problem. And again, it would have to be this dollar for dollar, like outgoing, this is the amount, it can't be,
No,
it can't be, well, we're giving credit to this person and not that person. Yeah, and so.
no, this would just be a pass through. It would be that in and itself would be. We got to figure out what we're doing with the stuff on the books. But it definitely would be a pass through. You get the money in, it goes back out. And you're right though. What happens if they don't pay? Yeah, we're gonna stick the teeth on them. But the outgoing operator is still owed. And like Yvette said, and I agree, they should get paid.
Yeah.
So yeah, the funds would have to come from somewhere to pay that operator.
And again, I think I would want assurances that both outgoing and incoming agree on the amount. And I thought of this too. I mean, that could solve this issue.
Well, you know, I don't know if getting, if there's some form, something with the state where we can have some kind of way of getting the small business loan, getting more tied with, working with our program or something with, is that possible for some of
So
the financing?
well, we can't force people to go get business
No.
loans. I mean, I know other states, and again, I think RSA, honestly, that, your job is to ensure that people can get their first job.
Yeah, that's the,
That was the intent.
what I thought was, yeah.
And I know some states, they do go out and get loans or that. I know that, again, to what Sally was saying, and this would be controversial, I'm not saying that we would need proof that you can pay, but you need some attestation, or if you bid on it, you're saying you can pay.
Well, I think to ensure the outgoing operator gets their money, I think it's kind of, I think you kind of need some kind of proof or show something that say that you have the funds to pay. I know people are not gonna like that, but how do you get around that? Because the outgoing person needs to get paid as well, get their money, so, somebody takes on, that kind of debt, take, in the bid, they see whether, you know what the initial inventory is and what, you coming in taking on. That's why I'm wondering if it's some kind of program that could work with our programs that the state already exists. And the reason why I'm saying that is because I went to a seminar and they have like 1% interest rate, and I know it's with the state, with Heartland Bank and all that kind of stuff. They have different programs that might be able to help the operators. But one was here. Yes.
The attestation, I think, I don't know if I like the proving it, because I don't even think of how I would do that. I mean, a bank statement showing how much I have in saving, I mean, that's not the selection panel's business.
Yeah.
And it's not, it's nobody's business. I don't know how else I would prove that I have it, other than just making a signed statement that.
Yeah.
Escrow account where you can have the deposit.
Hello?
Not sure it froze up or something.
That's weird.
I think we lost him again.
We're still on here. I just turned on my mic.
No, we were reading, because we were thinking of Michael Talley and some of what, how he's doing it, all of this private, business and stuff, the BE program supports it. But we were reading into it. Frank, you remember what we were talking about?
Oh, the inventory in
The
Alabama?
escrow. Yeah, Alabama.
Yeah, the inventory situation in Alabama, they have an escrow account. I don't necessarily like the way they do it, but it seems that now that was the question I had for Christy. I wonder if RSA is going to make them change that or has made them change that. But from the rules I was reading in Alabama, they have an escrow account. Every vendor, every assigned vendor in the state is required to pay a monthly fee. I believe it's 1%, or capped at $100. So basically, it's $100 per month. I think the only exempt people are licensees and temporary operators. But they call it an escrow account. It is used to, that money's paid in. That is used to, when they're setting up a new facility, to purchase inventory. Sometimes I believe it's used, and I was kind of reading into the way it was written. It also is used to provide, maybe if the new vendor coming in needs, I guess I would say, coin mech money or some other additional supplies. So I think it's just a continuous loop system. My concern with $100 per month, though, is we probably have, and I don't know, Alabama may have it too, but some smaller facilities here in Ohio that I'm not sure some of those facilities could absorb $100 a month. But I mean, we could adjust that amount downward a little bit, I think, if we
Okay.
needed to. But I don't know. The way I was reading it, because I remember when I was reading it and I had sent it to Yvette as well, and I was looking at it and I'm going, I don't know if RSA is going to continue to allow this or not. They may or may not, or maybe they did. I don't know. And I don't know if Christy's able to find that information or not so that we could have it. I don't necessarily like that route, but it might solve a lot of problems here especially if we have a way to fund what we need to do moving forward without kind of throwing everything into chaos. And I don't know. I mean, yeah, we would have to look at that rule more in depthly and review it and figure out how that would work in the Ohio Administrative Code and all of that, all of that involved with it. But hopefully I did a good job of describing that.
No, you did fine, and that,
Madam Chair, that's not gonna work. Sixth Circuit Court won't allow that, the decision from the Sixth Circuit Court, all of a sudden you are putting a burden
Where's the set aside?
it's in addition to set aside, it doesn't go along with what the five things were set
yeah,
aside.
and they are doing an addition to set aside.
Yeah, that,
Specifically says it in there.
so yeah, they're calling it set aside, and you can't, I mean, if we could use set aside
Well,
for it,
well,
we wouldn't have the problem to
yeah.
start with.
Yeah, they're not calling it set aside, but they're doing it in addition to.
Yes, but we're not allowed to, it's like a commission.
Mhm.
We're not allowed to charge and operate, and they're still paying commissions in Alabama too. So they pretty well ignored they're one of the states that has just kind of turned a blind eye, as it were, to the Sixth Circuit opinion. That I don't see any way that would get around that. Somebody would grieve that, they would win immediately.
How do we, if we want to form an escrow account, how do we, well, I guess you're saying, we won't be able to.
So, Madam Chair,
Yes.
I pulled up Alabama's legislative rules, escrow fund. A fund managed by the SLA and maintained for the following purpose: to provide timely purchases of initial and/or expanded merchandise, to provide for the expedient payment of vendors while affording the option of identifying the best price and quality from a variety of wholesalers, to provide for expeditious access to petty cash, which is often needed to supply coin, MAC, and bill changers, and to provide for effective, efficient reconciliation of obligations between new and transferring vendors. So I agree with Annette. I think this whole escrow and to charge that. Again, ideally, what's on the books now was supposed to always regenerate and be that escrow account. And if people paid off what was on the books, but again, it's always on paper, as everyone says.
Right.
And it's always merchandise and it's never cash. And I can't tell you how much we've eaten as the agency by giving credit to one and not the other. So that, unless you had some, that's the other thing you can look at is it's already being drained, but unassigned, unencumbered money, like you're looking for a pot of money to help with this thing. And I don't know, I agree with Annette though, charging people another fee or something to create it would not comport with that Sixth Circuit, but interesting.
Yeah, yes, Frank.
I agree with that too. I mentioned that the other day when we spoke. I said I could see operators grieving that as being charged a fee, and that is what it is. That's why I just brought it up just so we could have the discussion, because even I was skeptical. I'm like, I said earlier when I was talking about this that I don't know how Alabama's doing that, and in accordance with not only the Sixth Circuit Court, but also RSA. And I'm surprised RSA hasn't pushed back on that, but not our state, so I'm staying out of that.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I thought about the escrow account would be for the incoming operators, instead of having to prove that you have the financial means to move around, to move into something, is to put something into an escrow account. That way, rather than have to prove bank accounts or something like that, they have deposited the money. It's there for the outgoing operator. That way, that solves that problem. That was my
thought.
Yeah, that was my thought process on something along the lines of an escrow account.
But it's an escrow account, you're talking about individual escrow account.
And that's what, I don't know, I don't know, you know, I just looked something up really quick and that's what came to mind.
Yeah.
So I don't know how you would set something like that up. It was just, that was the thought process behind it.
What, Madam Chair?
Yeah.
I mean, it might be something similar to, what's it called when you like, when you've agreed to like on a real estate, you agreed, okay, I'm gonna buy this house, and you give your realtor like $5,000 for them to hold on to until they close it.
Yeah.
They have a name for it, but I can't think of the name of it either.
But it's you're agreeing you will pay.
Yeah. And if you all of a sudden back out,
Then it's over.
then you lose that money.
Yeah.
You lose that,
Opportunity or
you-
that house
but-
or whatever.
yeah, it gives something to the sellers that if it's the last minute and they've known you were gonna buy it and you back out now, you lose that. But, so it'd be similar, the Bureau, someone would write a check, now they wouldn't lose it like that, I guess, if they backed out, because they're not getting anything out of it. And there's no reason to do that, no one's out any. But the, maybe you have to give a check. If you're the successful bidder, you give a check to the Bureau in the amount that was listed on the, on the, the thing, the bid that everyone determined was the appropriate amount. And then after the inventory, the outgoing person would get, once you figure that out, the exact amount, then you can clean that away. But in the meantime, the Bureau has the money. They have,
Well, this makes.
they have to make it all right, because it's not going to be that exact amount, obviously. It's going to be either a little more, a little less.
I'm trying to figure out how would we continue to do the assessment, do the inventory at the time of transition. Somehow we would have to know what, a total of, estimating how much inventory you would, that facility, because what if you, like you said, what if you're a little over, the outgoing person just got to take that over, or whatever it's over, of that amount that's on the bid. So once you count, because you don't count until afterwards. You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So if it says $5,000, $5,000 worth of inventory, but then when you count, it's 6,000. Worth of inventory, and it's all good stuff.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I don't know what to do about that.
That would be a discretion thing.
Yeah.
If you already have $3 amounts set for that site, you go by that amount for the escrow. Anything over that at the time of transition, that would be at the discretion. I don't know what else to do with that.
Right.
Yeah.
We don't want them to leave them overburdened.
Yeah.
Maybe we put a wiggle room in there, 10% or something within 10% of this amount. Because we don't want, every dollar over somebody loses, but that it gives the outgoing person some incentive to right size the inventory,
Right.
to around that level, but it's not going to be exact by no means. So maybe we say within 10% of this.
And maybe use the word estimated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I think they were talking about the earnest money.
Yes, that's it.
Yes.
That's the word.
I couldn't think of the name of it.
But I think we're overthinking that. If we figure out, I don't know, maybe not. We might need to, if the Bureau can't pay the outgoing person, we might have to have something like that.
Well,
Because
wasn't it a suggestion that Oak Rehab cut the outgoing person a check?
only if the incoming person has an open case.
Oh,
I'm also interested in asking, Michael Colburn when he
Mhm.
comes.
Oh, yeah.
I'd like to ask him And, we need to ask him how not only his state does it, but, I mean, he knows about other states as
He
well.
does.
RSA frustrates me. I wish we have more distinct direction. And all states do it a little different.
Every state, you just about, there's some similar parts of it, so what you read, everybody had a little bit twist to it. How they're doing it.
Madam Chair,
Yes,
Chris?
Frank?
thank you. Christy, when you have a second, can you rescind that TAC? I want to be able to actually take the time to read it correctly, and I won't overlook it this time. I have it. I know it was sent, but I was looking through email and I'm like, okay, where the heck did it go? It's in there somewhere though, but if you can send it to me, so I can't read it right now, but.
What was it, Frank? Sorry.
He was a
The-
copy of the tax.
Oh, yeah, I read it, but ask me if I remember what it. So,
I was going to say it's probably RSA confusion, but
Yes,
Mhm.
very much so.
Chris, do you have it in front of you?
I do.
Can you read it out? That's right. Give me.
2403. Talks about the purpose of Randolph Shepherd. It talks about SLAs and RSV FP vendors and professional associations on behalf have sought guidance from RSA regarding the use of VR program funds to support the RSVP. Many of these inquiries concern federal requirements governing the initial establishment period, as that term is used in VR program regulations, and allowable cost for the purchase of initial stocks and supplies and the payment of initial operating expenses under the VR program for the benefit of the vending facilities operated by licensed blind vendors. RSA issued this technical assistance to clarify pertinent federal requirements and describe flexibilities, and I know, in determining the initial establishment period and when initial stocks and supplies and initial operating expense are allowable under the VR program. For reader convenience, this first time legal citations are used in the text and footnotes links. And I'm just skimming this. I'm not reading every single word. Many of the questions addressed in this TAC raise legal and operational issues that are interrelated. Therefore, to minimize redundancy and improve clarity, the guidance below is provided in a manner that we can believe is most helpful to VR agencies, SLAs, and licensed blind vendors. They serve and implement the federal requirements governing the use of VR for the purchase of initial stocks and supplies. So again, it says that RSA and the CFR permit VR agencies to use VR funds to purchase initial stocks and supplies for vending facilities supervised by the state agencies and operated by licensed blind vendors. And it's necessary for the establishment of new business enterprise. Initial stocks should be interpreted as items purchased for the purpose of marketing to customers. And this TAC further clarifies that initial stocks and supplies include the initial inventory and all supplies necessary for the establishment of new business enterprise by a licensed blind vendor operating a facility during the initial establishment period of the business enterprise for a maximum period of 6 months. Many questions addressed in this TAC relate to the 6-month period allowed for the use of VR funds to purchase initial. RSA provides its interpretation of these requirements, which have advanced given the evolution since it was first introduced in connection with the VR program in 1954. VR regulations do not require that all initial stocks and supplies and initial operating expense be provided for the maximum 6 period, rather that regulations permit that are necessary for the initial. And then talks about, I thought it gave like examples. Okay, it does give examples. So a new licensed blind vendor assumes responsibility for established site that is not fully stocked. An established vending facility is operated by vendor A who retires. Vendor B, another licensed blind vendor, assumes responsibility for the vending facility while it is still operating at a profit. As vendor A neared retirement, the vendor only replaced the stocks and supplies that were most popular with the customers. Other necessary inventory and supplies became depleted. This means vendor B needs financial assistance from the SLA to get the inventory and supplies fully stocked again. In this example, vendor B is establishing a new business enterprise when they become the new licensed operator of the vending facility once operated by vendor A. The initial establishment period for the purpose of the code for vendor B starts the first day they assume operation of the vending facility and ends on the last day that vendor B no longer needs financial assistance for the startup cost of the vending operation consistent with the state's written policies, procedures, rules, and federal requirements, including federal cost principles. In this state, the VR agency's written policy that the SLA state rules for the provision of services for the license allow for a maximum of 6 months for both the purchase of initial stocks and supplies and the payment of initial operating expenses. This means that VR funds may be used to purchase initial stock supplies or pay initial operating expenditures for vendor B for no more than 6 months. So using the analysis above, the SLA determines that vendor B needs financial assistance to get the vending facility fully stocked with inventory and supplies, some of which were left depleted by vendor A when they retired. To identify how much financial assistance to give vendor B, the SLA considered the amount of stocks and supplies that were remaining and the vending facility's operating income, thus determining the amount necessary for the establishment of vendor B's business enterprise in accordance to the law. The SLA considered the vending facility's operating income to determine when it would be sufficient to enable vendor B to begin purchasing stocks and supplies from the vending facility's income. The SLA also consulted the RSV FP rules for any state rules governing the allowability of financial assistance to vendor B. For example, the SLA may determine that vendor B only needs financial assistance from VR funds to pay for the initial stock and supplies for the first 2 months after assuming responsibility for the facility to bring the inventory and supplies up to an adequate amount. The initial operating expense. The SLA should conduct a similar analysis for initial operating expenses, bookkeeping, marketing, personnel. It is possible that SLA may determine that vendor B does not need financial assistance to pay for initial operating expenses since the facility has been established for a long time and was operating at a profit at vendor A's retirement. The SLA could determine that the vending facility's income generated by vendor B will be sufficient to pay the operating costs. Alternatively, the SLA could determine that vendor B needs financial assistance for 1 month given bills that will be due just as they take over the business before having an opportunity to generate income as the operator. The SLA would use the same analysis as above with respect to the purchase of initial stock and supplies and the payment of initial operating expense. If vendor B leaves and vendor C becomes the new operator of the business, thereby starting a new initial establishment period for vendor C's operation of the vending, the amount of financial assistance vendor C would need in terms of the number of months would depend on the facts that exist at the time, but not exceed 6 months. But they're not telling us where we get these funds from.
So does vendor C pay vendor B?
Yeah, it doesn't, it does not tell even what happens to vendor A, the money that they did leave there.
Yeah.
It's not saying where they're, how they're getting made whole with this.
Well, it says, building on the example above, but changing the facts like vendor A retires, leaves the vending facility fully stocked. Vendor B takes over the vending facility as the new licensed blind vendor. Vendor B decides, as part of the establishment of their new vending site, to hire additional staff so they can expand the hours of operation. The additional staff person will work 20 hours each week. Using analysis, the VR agency may only pay for the initial stock and supplies for vendor B that may be necessary for the short transitional period to accommodate bills related to stock and supplies due to the ability of vendor B to generate sufficient income. Since vendor A left the vending facility fully stocked when they retired, given that the existing vending facility, vendor B, is taking over a thriving business operation, vendor B will be able to replace the stock and supplies as they are depleted. However, with additional staff, they will incur significantly more operational costs. Therefore, it would be reasonable for the VR to use VR to pay for salary and expenses for the additional person for a maximum of 6 months. So again, what I'm reading is,
We are paying the employee.
well, and that is a possibility, but what I am reading is that it's one or the other. You either pay for,
Yeah, you don't get-
VR can either pay for the initial or for the,
Some expenses.
right.
Yeah,
Um,
doesn't sound like it.
But I'll resend this. I think you guys do need to read it. It's 14 pages long.
Yeah. I started reading it, I got read.
Uh-oh. Hello?
They left us again.
Yep, we lost them.
It's Friday, maybe the system knows it's Friday.
Maybe
I
so.
think it does.
Frank, I did send you, I also
We're still here.
sent you a
Yeah.
copy of that TAC as well.
It probably wants to go to sleep like the rest of them.
So,
need
Madam
coffee.
Chair,
Yes,
does that TAC, Christie, and you said it's 14 pages long, does it even talk about transitional from experienced operators and how they envision that to work, or do they even address that if you know off the top of your head?
Some weird stuff about.
when it's talking about B and C, I think it's talking about a little bit, but it doesn't tell us where the money, how does the other guy get paid, you know, as you get into that string of transitions, how, you know.
And Sharon,
Yeah.
that's the one Christie where it starts talking about like a storefront and the operator, you know, taking over something and
Mhm.
rent be paid. And I mean, there was a lot of stuff that has nothing to do with the inventory.
Yeah.
Per se in that. It was more to do with, honestly, I think it's more to do with what VR could do.
And the establishment.
Yeah, and establishment of facilities and what VR funds can be used for.
Which is good to know.
It is,
Yeah.
it is. And there was one state, I know we kind of went back to this, that everyone going in, they just got VR, you know, you just popped a case open and they paid. I don't remember if it was Indiana or Kentucky, but they had the option of opening a case and having somebody pay their bill. And that is an option, but it almost seems kind because what the operator's going to do, if they would just leave the product, yes, that would be ideal. And then but that's not what's going to happen. I don't see operators doing it if they're not getting paid.
But again, I've talked to operators, I've talked to the Kentucky people, and they're like, well, if people are going to, and I know it's been brought up, that poor customer service, people are they're gonna sell down all their product. And, you know, I talked to an operator, I think from Georgia, is like, but then they're losing money they're losing money as they're going out. They're losing the opportunity. And, you know, I know change is scary and it's different, but we've got to figure this out.
And I think we I don't know how, we do have to have something on how people leave, that it kind of gives them how you leave your location, you know, moving forward to you. Correct. That has to count for something.
And Madam Chair, we have the other issue then, and I know we got to figure out, you know, permanent big transitions first, but temps, I don't. Temps are going to be a whole other issue.
Well, I
Because
think-
VR is not even going to get involved in temps.
Right. I think that's where the SLA, if inventory is needed, will have to, because I think that's where they would have to buy the inventory for the tip. Or you have to, in order to get a tip, you have to provide the inventory the inventory necessary. Which is, you know, I don't know, that might leave a lot of people off the table, but you should, I mean, I think you.
Madam Chair?
Yeah.
And the same thing then at the end of the temp, when it does go to a permanent transition,
Uh-huh.
if you bought your own,
You should get your, yeah.
yeah, you're gonna want your
You
money
want one.
for
Definitely
what you
so.
left.
Definitely so. Now, Christy, is that an issue with you all,
I think temps are, that is a different beast. What I would like for temps is it to be, again, that we provide the initial inventory and the expectation is that that inventory is there when they leave.
yeah.
That's the easiest way to do it.
And that could be signed off on. That might be, Madam Chair, that might be something that can be done. Temps are a little easier to
Yeah.
deal with. We have a lot more control. Is you don't have to, you don't like the terms, you don't have to take it.
Right.
That's an extra. It's not,
Right.
I don't want to
It's not,
put too much pressure on folks for their permanent facility as far as that goes. But on a tip, you don't have to take it if you don't want to.
yeah.
It's like, doing the sales buying machine or something like that. I have no problem putting standards on a temp like that.
Mhm.
And again, Madam Chair, this
Yes.
is where it gets confusing too to me. Like any non-federal funds used to purchase allowable initial stocks and supplies or pay for initial operational expenses will count towards the state's match and maintenance of effort requirements and must be reported as non-federal share on the VRRSA 17. And that's where it gets a little bit more confusing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's moving forward on some of that. Well, the first piece, the VR help, and I don't still see from one established operator to the others, is none of that's helpful. I think we can, for new people, I think it's easier, but it's how do we get people to leave?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
and Christie said something, for temps, it's easy if the program provides it, operator leaves it. I think
Yeah.
that's good. Where's the program going to get the money to provide it?
So,
Not a brand new facility. I understand brand new is different.
Right.
This is
right.
existing facility. Someone has to come in and take over because the operator left. We don't have time to bid, for the myriad of reasons why.
Okay, we're talking about temp now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right now, we've got that little bit of DUI funds, but that's not going to be around for long. And so that's an excellent question, Annette. Excellent question. Excellent question.
Well, I think with that,
And
people have to provide their own inventory in order to, it's a temp. So you should.
Well, and again, if it's a brand new temp, I think we are obligated to do that.
Absolutely. No problem.
I think we have too many temps.
But what about an established location that's a temp? An established
Why
location,
are we-
you still
Yeah.
obligated to provide?
No, because that's not, it's
not a new location.
Right.
So, in order for us to do that, and that's the piece I was talking about, on a new location, that a person who's temping should be able to provide the inventory. It's something we can put that on the.
Again, I think it all depends on the size.
Yeah.
Are they temping a couple machines or are they temping a huge university?
Yeah,
That's the problem.
trust me, it's a lot. It's like, Lord.
Yeah, Madam Chair, if you would have had to pay for your inventory when you came in and give a check to the outgoing operator for all that was there.
Oh, there wasn't much there.
Well,
If it was,
bad example, yeah.
but yeah, I understand. Well,
A lot of monsters.
in that case, though, what you just said, though, is the incoming operator can open up a VR case.
Right. But
I wouldn't think they'd be allowed to, Madam Chair, for a temp.
Oh, for a temp? No.
Yeah, they probably can't. Yeah.
Okay, you're right. Not for a temp.
He's unassigned income, but
That's good. That's insurance. That's Coke's going away.
Yeah. If I was taking over a tent, I would not apply to do a tent if I could not pay for the inventory.
I know, but
That's there, but not everybody's in that.
yeah, Madam Chair, not everyone's in that position.
Right.
And Madam Chair, we don't
Yes.
want to hurt our program
No, we
by,
don't.
it, not everyone's in that position, and we might, there's sometimes we're scratching and scratching
get a
to
tent.
get a tent.
Yes. Just. How does other states handle their tents though? Did you see anything on that, Chris?
I haven't researched that.
I can't even think. My other one charted.
And I probably shouldn't have brought it up, Madam Chair, but I'm thinking, because we probably need to figure out the main transitional inventories first.
Right.
Yeah.
I think
And
that,
then worry about the
Yeah,
tent,
'cause-
but,
because my brain is all over the place.
yeah, I know, we're talking in circles, that was my
Yeah, I
fault.
was trying to, because if we don't figure out the main one, that's it's attempt is a way of making extra money, an opportunity plus, helping the program. So we can probably.
Madam Chair, Mark Wood, Mark Messick, you guys have any insight? Can you solve this problem?
Oh, the mark.
He just
I don't know. I
laughed.
have temporaries, but I
Let's
pretty
turn
much
it. Yeah.
did my own
Hold on,
inventory,
Mark.
so.
I have all my own inventory, so that's the tough one.
Yeah, I know.
Well, that's the thing,
And Matt,
saying about a tent.
and Madam Chair, I was going to say, I
Yes,
don't think,
right.
I don't think it's realistic to ask somebody to come up with $15,000 or $20,000 to Temple University, even though they already have a facility. I doubt they're going to have, 15 or 20,000 laying around to put up to be able to temp a facility. And that's where Annette was going to. We don't want to put something in place that locks people out of just overlooking, a temp opportunity when we do need them to do that for large universities to get sales established and everything, even if they're only doing it for one school year. But my hope is most people that would do that, most of that inventory would be, kept close to where the initial is. And when they turn it over, the new person coming in will have inventory there. And if it's a new licensee, they would have, hopefully they'd have VR backing them up and everybody would be able to get, the outgoing operator, or if the program was owed, it would all take care of itself in the ideal world. But I will be honest, and we all know ideal doesn't always come out the way it's supposed to. Thank you.
So, Madam Chair,
Yeah.
University of Toledo main campus, we're taking that over in July, and we're temping it. So we are responsible for coming up with the initial inventory.
Right.
We are, because it's a new
Brand new.
facility.
Yeah.
New facility.
Yes.
And
Lost them again.
Is it storming out or something?
It is sunny and beautiful.
I don't think Microsoft Teams likes this discussion.
The trial.
Yeah, that's what it is. Teams don't like this discussion.
15 minutes at a time.
So for the University of Toledo,
Uh-huh.
so we're gonna set that up. I have no idea how much the initial inventory is. Let's say it's 15,000.
Yeah.
And like right now, the temp person that is gonna go in, right now, under the current rules, they're going to do an agreement saying that, they have initial inventory of 15,000 that they're gonna owe the program over under blah, blah, blah. But under this new process,
the expectation is that 15,000 is part of that facility, and that when that temp person leaves,
There should be 15.
there should be 15,000 left there.
Am I not understanding something? I thought even under the old one, he still would have to leave. If you all are buying $15,000 worth of inventory, he still would have 15, you have to have the 15,000, either, in cash or cash and inventory combined when he leaves, right? He still would have.
Under the
to have
current
it.
rule, yes.
Under the current rule, but under the proposed rule is that this is where it's so confusing because you've got the operator and you got the facility.
Mhm.
That 15,000 is part of the facility. It's the
Yeah.
initial establishment period.
Yeah.
And so someone else comes in after he temps it and they a brand new VR case. Like does he own that inventory because it was established with this is where I get really confused because you have the operator and you've got the facility. Is that a gift to him or that he then and he's going to keep it replenished and then the new person comes in and it's brand new, they have a VR case that VR counselor is going to cut him a check for $15,000. $15,000 of stuff that he got for free because we established it.
Give him $30,000.
Yeah, I mean it's very confusing.
Well, wait. If the VR is different than you all buy. VR is for
The VR cannot purchase the initial because it is a brand
that's
new
what I'm
facility.
saying. So you all are purchasing the initial. So the operator going out, only how he would get anything is if anything above the 15,000, right?
Under a proposed new rule. But we're trying to get out of that business of overage under. You've got to maintain, and if it's over, I think he takes it with him. Under a new rule, not the current.
The only problem with that is, I don't have a problem with it other than if it's like specific stuff that, we have these foreign rights agreements and we have all that,
Right, what if they have
able
another
to
place?
use certain things where they're going,
Or, Madam Chair, university seasonal. The
Yeah.
transition takes place a different time of year.
Right.
If it's summertime, you might not want the $15,000 worth of stuff there.
That's true.
Yeah.
Go back to the previous summer's sales for that month.
Right. You can determine what the proper inventory level would be. I think
Yeah.
that can be done.
Yeah.
But still, he came in with the $15,000 quote gift.
But that was
VR paid it. Yes.
okay. Or did the
And
Bureau pay?
The Bureau.
Bureau paid that. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. The Bureau paid that.
But I don't think it's a gift if the Bureau pays it. If VR pays it, okay, that's one thing. But if the Bureau paid it, it's part of the facility.
Yeah, and Madam Chair, I don't have a problem with that. If VR paid, VR just bought me a Braille sense. That's fine. So, I don't have to leave it with anybody. It's mine. The state of Ohio is kind of, and the federal government's kind enough to have funds to provide things like that for people. So, that part, if VR covers it for somebody, then cool. Is it a gift to someone getting out ahead? Yeah, but I got out ahead by a $5,000 Braille set. So, that's fine. And on a temp, I think we can make it so the operator going into something like UT, we tell them, you're not going to get reimbursed for what's left behind. That's a brand new thing. You were given this, the program provided it. When you leave,
Do you mean on a temp or?
this is a temp. Christie's thing where the program pays for initial inventory.
Yeah.
You're not going to get reimbursed. Now, but my problem is, what if he only leaves $5,000?
And we're eating 10.
Yeah.
That's the only.
But then going on, okay, so still same example. So a new person comes in, and let's say that the temp left the 15,000. Then there's no transaction at all, no monetary transaction. New person comes in after that initial temp. That 15,000 should still be there.
Right.
They get it permanently.
Yeah.
They run it for 2 years, but then they leave. Now, at that point in time, it's no
They
longer.
should be still leaving the 15,000 because that was the initial established amount.
They should.
It still should be leaving that 15,000.
Madam Chair, they should, but I don't know that they will. It's worth it. And I think where we're getting caught up, where all these states are doing this successfully, that's how they've done it.
Yes.
That's the notion in their mind.
Yeah.
Our folks are not going to have that notion in their mind. They're going to say, well, hey, I can still provide decent customer service up to the day I leave, but I'm not gonna leave anything on the shelves. So instead of 15, I'm gonna leave 5. And I still have stuff in the machines, I'm still making money, but I'm not gonna leave.
Well,
all that
maybe we
extra.
could put something in the rules to discourage that, because it is. Right. Right.
Is there something in the rules?
Well, I'm saying in the rules to where in order for you to be, well, I guess, once we got the inventory and stuff, but eligible, some kind of tracking of how you leave your facility.
I don't think there is. The comment made to me at my transition was that there's nothing in the rules that says I have to leave you anything.
Correct.
So that's what I don't think there is.
But you
Correct.
owe it in money.
Well, no, he paid for his own.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, he paid for his own. But even if he didn't pay for his own, there's nothing that says that you have to leave any profit.
Right, exactly.
You can write a check if you owe, if under our current rules, I don't have to leave a Frito for somebody. I could take every bit of inventory I have, write a check to the Bureau for $2,500 and we're good to go. Under our current rule, you don't have to leave anything.
Okay, that's an eye-opening, because I always thought you did have to leave whatever your initial is.
You do, but you can do it in
leave it in
cash.
product or cash. Yeah, one or the other.
Right.
But that doesn't help the incoming operator.
Right.
If you don't leave a single Snicker bar there,
Right.
and there's nothing requiring you to do so. Yeah, you owe the program. If you leave zero, you owe anything that your initial was, but you don't have to leave anything.
I don't think anybody's one, but I think for us to be able to, we can do the hard stuff. We may have to put something in the rule to require them to leave a efficient amount of inventory. Or
And
something
it should be similar to their initial inventory, whatever they leave.
Yeah,
Correct, but and I'm all for that. Then we need to think of what happens if they don't. What kind of penalty? What is their incentive?
well, the incentive,
Other than what the rule says.
well, you don't move on. You don't get, it can count against you in a selection. It should be able to count against you in a selection, because that there tells you what type of operator or whatever, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because you're hurting the program. Not only you're hurting the next operator coming in, it hurts the program.
Madam
So
Chair?
I think, yes, Frank?
I was going to say, if a vendor would say, hey, I'll just pay the program what I owe them, pay them the cost of the initial inventory. Couldn't the program turn around and use that money to purchase the initial inventory for? Because
Yes, I think that solves that problem. And it gives people the incentive, because if we don't put something tough in the rules to get people, they're not going to do it. You're right in that.
Yeah.
So we have to have something that encourage that incentive to say, okay, I want to bid on something else. I may want to move on one day. I need to make sure that this doesn't count against me. It's kind of like the penalties of our MORs and stuff. We don't want it to count against us. So you got to make sure we, do them timely.
Well, Madam Chair, my point was if you have a vendor who doesn't want to go through the somebody who has the money to do it, and they say, okay, I'm the outgoing operator. They say, this is what I owe the SLA, and the SLA agrees, and they say, okay, I'm going to give you a check right now, and then you guys can, do the transition, and the check's good and everything. And I don't know, maybe the incoming operator goes, well, there is inventory here, but not enough, or maybe it's a situation where the outgoing just wanted to take their inventory with them to their next location. But remember, I said, the outgoing operator paid the program, so that money.
That means they're even. That's the incoming operator prerogative. If they, feel like, well, as long as the program gets paid, and they can use that money to help the incoming operator, as long as the outgoing operator. But I think our problem was making sure the outgoing operator gets paid.
Well, that's true too.
Well,
And I'm not ignoring that. I'm just trying to find a way to keep this as fair and as even as
Yeah,
possible.
yeah, I agree with you though. If you,
Madam Chair,
yes,
we can think of something at the front end,
okay,
better than giving, I'm trying to think how this can work, and it might be messy, but this may work. If somebody, as part of the rules, part of their BOA, they agree you came in with this amount. You leave with this amount. Just not like we do now.
mm-hmm,
You have to leave this amount behind because that's the gift you were given, and we expect you to pass it along, the gift. You either owe, like you do, kind of like you do right now, you leave inventory or cash to make that right. That helps cover that end. I think that makes it so there's appropriate stuff there and people pass it on. What we got to do is for the folks that takes care of the problem of people draining the facility. And it takes care of if we can sell it to everybody, the notion of, you're losing out by leaving stuff. You're losing out by leaving stuff behind. Where we're going to run into the problem is during this initial period, where there are people who have zero, so they're not going to get paid anything back. We might be able to fix that, where they can get paid something back, or they came in with a super small inventory, and things like that, and during the transition of this, because that's. They're not given anything then. I mean, we're going to forgive this stuff, and to get people to sign off on something that they're going to just leave everything and not get paid for at the end, it's going to be a hard pill to swallow for a lot of folks.
no, are you still talking about the initial or?
Yeah, during transitions and stuff. I'm just trying to think through how it'll work.
Yeah.
After the rules are passed, and after the rules are passed, the new facilities transition, then moving forward, I think that can work. You come in, you agree, okay, this place has $5,000 worth of inventory. You agree initially to leave $5,000. People used to that, whether it be in cash or stock.
Yeah.
Everyone's used to that.
Yeah.
What people are gonna have a hard time swallowing is what they have now.
Mm-hmm.
I think, and
sometimes depending on what you're selling or whatever is going on, maybe what was there maybe wasn't adequate. If you built sales up and
yeah, the facility could be way different.
Yeah, it could look differently between operators.
And again, Madam Chair, not to put a wrench in this, I like this where it's going, but like if someone's been at a facility for 10, 15 years and they have a $7,000 initial inventory, well, $7,000 that they got 15 years ago, it's a lot different than now.
It's a lot different now.
Right. Absolutely, it does. And so where did the difference come in then? Because if they're only required to leave the 7,000,
right,
and the facility actually needs 10,000,
or that they were purchased 7,000 worth of stock, that the value of that stock has changed. Maybe not the dollar amount, but the value, because you're buying stuff at a higher price than you were 15 years ago.
Exactly.
And you'd have to price it at Vistar or Sam's or find out what the current.
Well, and that's why I think requiring invoices from the last 6 months, I absolutely like that.
Yeah.
But then again, I do like the opportunity of us right-sizing everything too, because we've got people that have like thousands, $35,000 in initial inventory where the makeup of the facility is completely different than what it was.
Yeah.
Or they've gotten rid of stuff or they've added stuff.
Right.
So I think, and I do like Mark Messick's suggestion of using I think that's great.
good. That was good. But yeah, Madam Chair, that will be the problem. Someone's there a long time. They're 15, 20 years, and we have some that are. And yeah, their initial inventory, if they leave that behind, it may not be adequate for the incoming person.
Yeah.
So then somebody's got to make up the difference. Now, we could say the incoming person has to make up the difference and just leave that $7,000 perpetually on the books of what's left behind until a brand new person comes
Well,
in.
Christine mentioned about the overages. They didn't want to get up, but if your facility 10 years ago, like you said, looking different today, might require more inventory. So that outgoing person, if they started off with 7, like you just said, 12, or if the bureau want to pay the operator the difference, where is the difference?
Well, we have to now, but in all honesty, I think the majority, we have two. I don't want to talk in total generality,
Okay.
but I view two pots of mostly. We've got the people that have, gone in and invested a lot of money and put credit card debt and paid off their own. We've got that. We've got that bucket of people. And we've got a large bucket of people where the inventory that they have, and no fault to their own, is not appropriate for the facility at all. It's generally way over than what it should be.
Anything that?
Madam Chair?
Yes.
And then you got, and I don't like using myself as it, but it's what I'm familiar with. Once it's way under, there's still an inventory there,
Yeah.
but it's nowhere near adequate. If I said, if I left with $2,500, it might as well be nothing.
Right.
So it's.
And I'm not against coming up with, but I just don't know how logistically it would work. Like two systems, just like one state from, January 1 of 2027. This is how it's working. If you had the old system, we phase that out if that's possible. I don't know. I really think that you guys during statewide should talk to like the Jeff Tolles and some other operators.
Yeah, I think that this will be part of our.
Come up with some conversations of how this could potentially work.
Right. Yeah, I think getting everybody, but somebody might have some ideas we didn't think of.
Michael Colburn, I think, is a good asset, and I know that at Blast, what's frustrating with Blast is, and I know Sally and Kelsey went there. There's really not opportunities to talk to other states and other people. Like I want those times to be able to talk. I wish there was a state that let's emulate that after them. Let's not recreate the wheel, but there's some nuances.
And, yeah.
One thing I am learning is that a lot of other states' rules are as clear as mud, like ours.
That thing you read from Rhode Island was
convoluted.
I got nothing else.
I didn't either.
And then, I know Colorado is trying to do the same thing right now. They're in the same boat. They're trying to change as well.
Now, have they came up with any ideas?
I don't know what she's.
Is Jessica the
Beecham? Jessica Beecham is there. I don't know if she's their chair right now.
reach out to her?
Yeah, I know her. I might talk to her. And I know Kevin Worley is part of their program too, so I might reach out.
Reach out to them.
I know
Colorado. Get some. They can choose from.
Yeah,
from other
and maybe
states.
take pieces of this and parts of that. Don't recreate the wheel, like you said. I am going to be leaving, and that
Okay.
turn it over to you.
Okay.
I gotta go to a few.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
I'll be going to one on Monday.
Yeah.
Oh, that's sad. Oh.
So. I'm into a Catholic church. I don't know what's going to happen.
Well, we usually zap people. Oh yeah. Don't touch the holy water.
Last time I went to the Catholic church with my mother, that was a long time ago. So yeah, we'll see. All right, guys, I'll see you.
See you next week.
It'll take a couple minutes.
Bring some games.
I'm playing euchre.
Oh yeah.
I got one
people-
that game. That game gives me a headache.
I don't know if I'll do much or not Friday night. The Reds are playing. I may just be in my room and listen to the Reds.
Stop being a part of it.
Oh, no, that's my husband. He wants to play euchre. He enjoyed it last year. So playing euchre, and Misty's bringing Uno. So anyone wants to play Uno? Yeah, or will you Misty
And I'll
is.
play bigger.
Oh, cheese. And it's all blind people. I mean, they're playing cards. So he'll put down a yellow 7 and say blue 3.
I didn't think about that.
He's bringing his own special deck. That's not braille.
So, Madam Chair.
Yeah.
So this is Rule 5. Rule 7 is the transitions. Where else are we? I think.
I think we're good. The other rules, we do need to get out a copy of the draft.
Okay.
That
and then
we've
each
done so
individual
far.
thing. And then I think we need to go back to definitions.
Yes, definitions will,
And did we do Rule 14?
yes,
Okay. So it's just really 5 and 7
yes.
and 3 that we need to probably
3, we
flesh out.
probably need to go back over. We did a lot with Rule 3. We probably do need to go back through it because I know there was a lot of discussion on various things, but most of the other rules were minimal
Yeah, I thought so too.
changes. They a few words here and there, and not too much substantial changes. Which is good because this inventory thing is going to be that's going to whatever we end up thing on is going to be, there's going to be a lot of folks that really hate it, and there's going to I get it when I talk to people about it. They say, well, I'm not going to want that. That's awful. And why do they want to change? And I said, it's legitimate. It's not just someone wanting to change it. It's the money. The money is forcing our hand. So I think if people understand that, they'll be okay with it. Most will. So what's everyone thinking? Any?
So
more discussion?
going back to Mark Messick's idea
Yeah.
about 45 to 50%, I think maybe what we could do is like come up with some numbers based off of existing facilities on what that might look like, and what are we thinking, like a 2 or 3 week, maybe 3 week? I could do 3 weeks.
3
3 weeks, and what initial stocks would look like based off of sales. But again, we do sales monthly, so that would be taking a monthly sales, dividing it by 4, and then taking 3 weeks, 50%, right?
I would even do it like we do for the stipend, where you take the month, divide it by number of days, get a daily amount, and times that by 7. Because
For sales?
yeah, that's how we do the stipend. Now that I've said that, though, that doesn't necessarily work for places that don't have any sales on like Saturdays and Sundays.
Right.
That works well for those
Canellis.
Canellis, yeah, but it probably doesn't work well for. But I know that's how they do it for the stipend, to figure out what the daily sales are, multiply that by 7, and go from there. I think that wouldn't work for counters or for office buildings.
Why not what you order? Like I put in my order for Vistar today, it was 4,000. Multiply that by 3.
But what if you're over ordering or under ordering, or it depends on a month that, you know what I'm saying? And that changes.
Yeah.
That changes by month.
Yeah, it's
Now,
not like
I like
purchase
what Mark
myself.
was saying with taking, we'll just say 50% of the sales. That's a good number. Folks with Canellis would be more, we're usually, or less actually, it's usually 30-some% maybe, or 40, but overall, we'll say 50% of sales. Figure out what it is for
For the month?
do we do a month?
I think we should do a month, but
I was going to say, if we do a month, that makes it easy. We don't have to break it down by week.
But okay, so I have my Tableau up right now, and I'm not giving names or this is the
Okay.
rest area. So in October, they did 12,000 in sales, November 9, 9,500, December 11, January 6,500, February 73, March almost 12,000. So a total of, for 6 months, $58,000 in sales.
Mm-hmm.
So
When I
divide
heard-
that by 6, and it's an average, and maybe that,
No. But what I would do if the transition was, say, in November, what was the sales in November?
okay, November there was 9,491.
Okay, 9,500.
Okay.
So you take half that, that's your number. That's 1 month worth.
$4,750.
Yep.
Okay.
I agree with that.
And so then, if it were to happen in January, where it was 6,500,
Right?
so it would be,
3250.
and so it would be from the previous year's month.
Yeah, because that's when they're transitioning.
Yeah.
You don't want to figure in summer sales like everything else.
Yeah.
Like a
So
July
that's the-
sale in January.
Yeah, that's the that's the month where they need the product. So
So you're dividing by 2.
yeah.
So you don't just give them 2 weeks then.
Well, no, it'd be about a month's worth of, because assuming they're 50%, which can only be more, but soon they're 50% gross or 50% cost of goods, whichever the way you want to look at it. You're figuring that gives them about a month's worth of product. In a Canelli, it would be slightly more probably because the cost of goods is.
That was a Canelli.
Yes. But I don't think you're overdoing it. You're not underdoing it. I don't think that's,
That's enough.
yeah,
It's enough. Yeah.
for January, an initial inventory or an inventory on the shelf in the machines for a Canelli that does 6,500 at 3,250 is not a bad. That's
So
not excessive.
again, okay, here's another example. University in October,
Okay. Good month.
$49,000 in sales. So it would be 24,500
Yep.
initial inventory.
That's a lot, but
That'd be enough.
that should be plenty.
Enough.
Okay.
Yeah,
Now,
it
the
should be.
problem we would run into, that solves the problem of initial inventory. The problem we run into is if that person transitioned out of there in June. What was their sales for June? They one that did 49
Okay. Well,
they one that did 49 in October.
different people. It's different people.
Well, yeah, but that should be irrelevant to this.
Still going to sales.
Yeah.
Still going to facility.
And I know, okay, it's based on sales. It's had nothing to do with.
Where I'm concerned is if somebody goes in June, over the summer, how are they going to build up enough money and inventory for September and
refurnish it.
October?
Yeah.
I mean, some people could do it, but some
But-
couldn't.
That's where I would think, particularly if they're being promoted in, that they would open up a VR case
That's true.
and they would get inventory from VR.
So anybody could open up a VR case in that scenario?
I think so.
Yeah, if you're getting a promotion or a job save, you can open a VR case.
And that's in line with VR, because you shouldn't penalize someone who can't do it because they don't have the initial capital to go in there.
And they wouldn't have to pay back.
And they wouldn't have to pay it back. But the expectation would be, though, that they would leave it.
But that's where the thing is, like you said, if the person comes in October, they get $2,400 in initial inventory. They leave in June. We don't want them leaving $2,400
That is
in
correct.
inventory.
And then they pay in cash.
Yeah, that's true. They would have to pay the difference.
Because they
That's true.
had the inventory, they sold it, and they collected the money for it, so they owe us.
That's true. That's true.
But if they got money from VR, we wouldn't necessarily know that.
That part's true too, because that's all confidential.
Right.
Is there a way if they take over in June, knowing that in October they're gonna have these high sales, is there a way to set aside funds for them or say, we could give you this much when needed, but since you're in June and going through the summer, we're gonna give you this much to get started?
So, and I think ideally, what we would do is if someone were going in and had an open case, there would be conversations generally, and it is with Indiana, there would be conversations with the counselor because they're going to look at us, like what is appropriate, what is necessary. But I would think that if someone were going in on June, I would say, please keep this case open, maybe give them a little bit of initial inventory in June, just a little if they need it. But the main initial inventory really needs to be in end of July, August. Because you don't want to set the person up to fail. You don't want that product to go bad. And again, what VR is going to require for any type of reimbursement or purchasing, either one or the other, technically, if they have no money, they would do a direct authorization to Vistar, Coke, Pepsi, whatnot, and they would get invoices from those companies. Or if you're reimbursing an operator, you would have to have invoices.
I'm going to throw a wrench in this. This is the fun part now. All right, someone comes in October, $2,400. They leave in June, and we're saying they owe $2,400 either in stock or cash. If they're a good operator and they leave, $10,000 in stock, pay the other $14,000 in cash, that's great. What if they leave the whole $24,000 in stock?
Yeah,
Then the new person's coming in with too much product.
that's right. It's going to go bad.
The outgoing person lived with their obligation. They left the amount they were supposed to leave.
I'm not sure why anybody would want to buy that much stock at that time of the year.
Probably not. Probably not.
I think stock should reflect their sales. And again, you could use the 50% number.
So again, for probably a bad example for facility, but no, October was 49,000 in sales. June was 4,770. July was 5,800. That was 823. Oh, sorry. Give me a good example. What's your facility number?
840.
There we go.
Well, now this isn't anonymous anymore.
Okay, but this makes more sense. This makes absolutely more sense. That was a bad example. That was a transition. That was.
It was, yeah, gotcha. Because one that's going to do 50 in October isn't only going to do 4.
No. So October was 30,000. And June was 16.
Yeah, it makes a lot more sense.
Yeah. But we have examples of that I gave.
Mm-hmm.
We do. And that's why we kind of need to right size these things as well.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
will he still be will BE still be there to count the inventory?
Oh,
Or is that
I think so.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
We're not getting off the hook that.
yeah. And not only for to be there to help with the operators and be an assistant, but you got to make sure the equipment and what other transitional stuff needs taken care of. I know there's an equipment inventory that needs done if there's any service calls that were neglected or
But the bonus
keys
of
getting
us
switched over and all
not
that.
having inventory agreements, along with the whole thing that we're within the rules of RSA, is that I think MORs will be easier, that you don't have, and then, again, we'll still have to have the certified to the AG. It would only be set aside. It wouldn't be, it should not be inventory. Even if we take on the inventory or, we do the pass through, that would be the only time. But like, people should not be owing the agency, have these large inventory agreements that then we would have to certify to the AG.
Well, no, that's not what we were talking about. We were talking about if somebody didn't leave the appropriate, they would owe the money to the program still. They would still leave. They're still required to leave whatever they were given up front, that amount at the end, so it can pass on to the next one. So there still could be where people owed.
But then that's where it gets confusing for me, because then there still has to be an inventory agreement. It's no different than what we're doing now. And then if they can't pay, then technically what we gave them in product value would have to go back to RSA if they couldn't pay within that 2-year period.
And that messes everything back up again. Because now we're back to what is obligating people to leave inventory behind. Adequate inventory
Right.
behind. We're back to that again.
Right.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Mark.
I'm just going to use facility 515 as an example. The previous operator passed away, and when I went in there was no inventory.
Yeah.
And it was 24, 25 machines, something like that. So, I put the inventory in there. Now, what do I leave the next operator that's going to be bidding on it and coming in?
Right. And that was your money that you used.
Right.
And so, that's another thing there where, now, in all honesty, if it's a brand new operator, Mark,
He can go to VR.
he could go to VR and VR would cut you a check.
Yeah.
But if it's an existing operator, technically if you're in Indiana or Kentucky, that person would have to cut you a check, or open up a case and have VR cut a check. What? You're looking at
What
me like I'm
person would have
crazy.
to cut them a check?
Hmm?
What person would have to cut him a check?
The incoming.
But
In
we would
Indiana,
still
they
go
do
off.
it pay.
We would go off the percentages to base what should be left there, right? Like the stock purchase from the month, or
Yeah.
Yeah.
on how much inventory should be left there.
Correct. So like if you, 515, I've got that up right now. January, 8,000 in sales. So it would be $4,000. If it was July, 13,000, it would be, $6,500. I don't know, like, how much money did you put in there? Do you know now? That was so long ago, like, and the receipts are probably gone, or you probably have no idea. Like, do you know how much you put of your own money into that?
No.
No.
Okay.
And you
Honestly, no.
don't. It's like, 439. I put my own money into stock it, but I was running other facilities at the time, so it's just part of the stock you buy. You don't take an inventory of what you actually put in the machines. I could probably come close, I guess, and Mark might be able to come close, say, okay, I filled all the machines up and
I
this is what it costs, but
I understand for existing, but in perfect utopia, a new system, people would probably have to track that, particularly if they're temping it. The temp thing is a little bit more confusing.
That's, yeah.
Hello?
yeah, we're
Really?
here. We're just
Oh,
all the
thinking,
smoke
that's
is
okay.
rising in the room from everybody's brains moving
Well,
here.
Microsoft Teams has been ornery this morning for whatever reason, so I thought maybe
Yeah.
it.
I understand you asking. Because you have disappeared a few times. It's funny, we've done this too. I don't know if we're closer or Is it? I have to tell y'all, this one is stumping me. Whenever you think there's a solution, it opens up
New door.
new doors. Yeah, it's just, sometimes I think, would it be easier just to find another funding resource and leave it the way it is? Let's find a way to get more money and just leave everything alone.
That opens a can of worms. Over
It
there.
does. It does.
Well,
I don't know where we get more money, but
well, that's what I was talking about at, I think, our last OVRC meeting, and that Madam Chair, where I said we need to try, and I don't, like I said there, I don't know if there's anything available. We need to try and see if there's any other unassigned income out there anywhere in Ohio. I doubt it, but we can look. I just don't know where to look.
But I'll tell you that's controversial too, because they don't want us to they want us to employ, why isn't Chris Johnson's coming back saying Chris Johnson doesn't exist?
oh,
What?
His email, trying to resend us.
no, and we can't do an assigned on federal. First of all, it has to be benefits, any money from that, and we can't subcontract on federal like we did with the coat contracts and stuff. That's not even an option for federal property.
Right.
So yeah, finding another pot of money through unassigned is not going to work. So I don't know.
It's one big sale.
I don't know. That's. I mean, I thought of that the other day. Not the big sale, but I thought if it'd be easier to find more money, but it's not. It is not easier.
No, and I honestly, Madam Chair, I honestly don't think there is anything, but I figured I'd bring it up in case somebody could think of something that I hadn't thought of.
Yeah. And we're not, right or wrong, we're not blessed in Ohio. A lot of states, some of them don't pay set aside because they've given up something, or they get resources from another. Some of them get money from their rest areas because they chose to do that instead of putting blind people to work, and making it so people don't have to pay. We don't have a facility like that, and if we did, I don't know if in Ohio that we'd want to do it. If it can put somebody to work, that's what we should do. I'm very anti-states that, get money, sell their job opportunities. But we don't have even job opportunities to sell here in Ohio, so to try and find a resource.
Madam Chair, do we think we're at a point where we maybe need to everybody
We
stop
must-
and think more about
Yeah.
this? And
I'm wondering that. Unless somebody has something else to contribute today, I don't know if we're going to go any further today or not. Because we all seem to be kind of at an impasse at the moment. So maybe we need to mull it over and see what happens next week. Maybe an operator will speak up and say, well, no, this isn't hard. Here's the solution. And we all go, aha.
Do you have that much faith?
Yeah, not really. But it could happen, or there might be some ideas from people who, like you mentioned, people like Jeff and Mike Colburn, and there might be some ideas that we haven't considered. That I do believe could happen. So maybe we should just wait till next week and meet again in 2 weeks and see what we can bring back.
all right.
Chris,
Madam
next
Chair?
week when you're
Hey.
taking notes from ideas of folks, when we have open discussion on it, take good notes on it.
I certainly will, actually.
I know you will.
Can you hear me? I certainly will. It's just a matter of taking good notes and
Yeah.
what have you. I'll be taking notes, and I'll have the recordings available as well.
Absolutely. Because
So,
if somebody comes up with something, we definitely want it um,
That'll be,
put down. Frank, were
so
you?
we are going to discuss it. Hopefully it's statewide, have hopefully our
I think so, during
open
the
forum
open
is
forum.
statewide, resolve that,
Absolutely.
open forum specifically. I think that's what we should do, I think.
I think it's a good plan. You know, we want operators to bring up stuff they want to bring up, but I'm gonna, if no one else does, I'll say, hey, anyone got ideas on inventory? So, Frank, did you
Oh,
have
no.
something?
No,
Okay.
I was just gonna make the motion to adjourn if
Oh,
you thought we
okay.
were done.
Well, go ahead. That's good. And actually, we don't have a quorum anymore anyway.
Oh, well, then maybe we don't even need it.
I just thought of that. When Yvette left, we don't have a quorum.
I thought it was 4.
4.
You've got Mark, Frank,
And me.
Mark.
Oh, Mark's there. Both Marks are there. We do have a quorum. Okay, that's right. I forgot both
Yep.
Marks. Sorry, Mark. I won't tell you which one I forgot. So,
All right,
all
Madam Chair, I'll
right,
make the
Frank.
motion. I'll make the
Frank
motion.
moved to adjourn.
Yep.
One of you guys second. I'm sure Mark's
Second.
All right, all right.
Second.
All right, we'll adjourn.
A good one, everyone.
You too. I got a little bit of time before my ride.
Hey, Christy.
Yes.